Few themes have crossed the centuries with as much mystery as Israel. Between myth and power, between faith and geopolitics, this small strip of land has become the epicenter of one of the greatest enigmas of modern history. Israel is not merely a country, it is a symbol of resistance for some, of domination for others, and of contradiction for all. There is a silent secret within its journey, an invisible line connecting ancient prophecies to contemporary diplomatic maneuvers. What began as a spiritual dream has transformed into one of the most sophisticated political and military machines in the world. But behind the headlines lies a story rarely told, a story about how faith intertwined with strategy and how collective trauma turned into a currency of power. The secret of Israel is not an accusation, it is an investigation. It is an invitation to understand how a nation forged in pain managed to turn suffering into authority. In this journey, the viewer is led through centuries of myths, wars, and promises. With each chapter, the veil lifts a little more, and what is revealed is uncomfortable but necessary, that perhaps Israel's greatest secret is not in its weapons or alliances, but in its ability to shape its own destiny, and with it, the destiny of the world. Chapter 1. The Ancient Roots. Since the beginning, Israel was more than a nation. It was an idea. That people who believed they were chosen for something greater, guided by a purpose that transcended the common history of empires. Scriptures and traditions shaped this sense of divine mission, a force that both united and separated. It is in this founding myth that the secret of Israel begins to form, in the belief that destiny and identity are inseparable. Over the centuries, the descendants of Abraham crossed deserts, exiles, and conquests, preserving a faith that resisted time itself. Each expulsion and return not only reinforced their spirituality, but also fed the notion of promise. The idea of a chosen people became a psychological and political pillar used to explain their own survival against the impossible. The mystery of Israel lies in how this sense of purpose endured even when everything seemed lost. Yet behind that belief lay a seed of tension, for the same divine calling that united the people of Israel also placed them in constant conflict with others. And throughout history, that duality, faith and power, spirituality and dominion, would become the central axis of what would one day evolve into the Zionist project. The secret, so far, was neither military nor political. It was the invisible force of an ancient idea that promised redemption while also awakening fear. Chapter 2. The Birth of Zionism. In the 19th century, the world was undergoing an ideological earthquake. Empires were collapsing, new nationalisms were emerging, and the Jewish people scattered through the diaspora once again sought a home that could not be taken from them. It was in this context that Zionism was born, a movement blending faith and politics, dream and pragmatism. Theodor Herzl, its principal architect, saw in Israel not only a spiritual promise, but also a survival strategy in the face of growing European anti-Semitism. However, Zionism was born not only of faith, but of fear. Herzl and other leaders understood that to exist safely, the Jewish people would need territory, an army, and global recognition. Thus, the spiritual utopia became a political project to create a modern state capable of guaranteeing power and legitimacy. The idea seemed liberating, yet it concealed a dilemma. For one people to be reborn, another would have to be displaced. And it is precisely here that the secret of Israel begins to take more concrete form. Zionism in its essence was a response to suffering, but also a seed of power, a movement born of pain yet strengthened by strategy. The same ideal that promised redemption to some drew boundaries for others. And this paradox between promise and possession would become the starting point for everything the world would witness in the following century. Chapter 3. The Impact of the Holocaust. The Holocaust did not merely scar humanity, it redefined the Jewish psyche. Millions of lives were destroyed, and the Western world faced its own monstrosity. When the concentration camps were liberated, the promise of never again echoed as a universal vow. But behind the sorrow, politicians and ideologues realized that collective trauma could serve as the foundation for a new project, a state that would represent security, redemption, and power. Israel was born from ash and guilt. The Western powers, shaken by shame, hastily supported the Jewish return to Palestine. Suffering, once invisible, became argument. What had been tragedy turned into justification. The Holocaust was transformed into a sacred symbol, not merely of remembrance but of legitimacy. The past became a moral shield, and any criticism of Israel began to be confused with heresy. Thus, trauma was converted into political instrument. While the people mourned their dead, leaders drew borders. The world witnessed the rebirth of a nation. Few perceived that beneath the cloak of justice, the cycle of displacement and pain was repeating, now with new faces and new victims. The secret of Israel began to reveal itself. Pain, when used as power, can become a weapon of domination. Chapter 4. The Founding of Israel, 1948. The year 1948 marked a turning point in modern history. Amid deserts, wars, and messianic speeches, the State of Israel was proclaimed. For some, it was the fulfillment of prophecy. For others, the beginning of a new tragedy. The United Nations approved the partition of Palestine, but the real partition was made by force, between tears and guns. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their lands, the exodus they would call Nakba, the catastrophe. Meanwhile, the young country consolidated itself with military, financial, and diplomatic support from Western powers. The discourse was one of reconstruction, but practice revealed another face: domination of territory under the logic of superiority and necessity. Each military victory reinforced the myth of an invincible people, and little by little, the spiritual ideal of returning to the Promised Land gave way to an ideology of conquest and control. In newspapers, they spoke of freedom. In villages, echoed the sounds of dispossession. Israel was born between faith and iron, memory and force. The world applauded the rebirth of a people without realizing that another was being silenced. The secret once again hid between the lines. When justice is told by those who win, truth becomes prisoner of history. Chapter 5. Territorial Expansion. Over the decades, Israel ceased to be a refuge and became a power. The wars of 1967 and 1973 expanded its borders and cemented its control over strategic territories. The nation that had been born out of fear now exported strength. Each military victory was celebrated as a miracle, but internally the moral cost grew. Occupations, walls, settlements, and a daily routine of surveillance that turned security into dogma. The expansion was not only geographical, but also symbolic. Israel began to influence the global economy, technology, and military intelligence on a massive scale. Under the banner of self-defense, it built one of the most advanced surveillance machines in the world. The promise of peace turned into a policy of control, and among deserts and walls, the dream of coexistence slowly dissolved. The secret of Israel now stood in plain sight. A country founded in pain, driven by survival, sustained by a profound belief in destiny, yet paralyzed by its inability to break with the past. Trauma became identity and history, a tool. And while the world still applauded its strength, few realized that in the attempt to never again be a victim, Israel had begun to resemble what it feared most. Chapter 6. The Role of Media and Diplomacy. Israel's wars were never fought only on battlefields. They were fought above all through words. From its earliest conflicts, the country understood that public opinion was as powerful a weapon as steel. Thus, it built a narrative of survival and heroism, designed to evoke empathy in the West and justify any action in the name of defense. Carefully chosen terms turned offensives into security operations and bombings into necessary responses. Major media outlets, influenced by political and economic ties, began reproducing the official version. Headlines were polished to preserve Israel's image as a democratic beacon amid Middle Eastern chaos. Voices that dared to question this version were silenced, labeled as biased, extremist, or anti-Semitic. Diplomacy, aligned with the media, operated with the same precision to persuade, shape, and suppress. Thus, an invisible power was consolidated, the power to control history as it happens, and the secret of Israel revealed another of its faces, that the domination of narrative is the domination of memory. For when one decides what the world should see, one also decides what the world should forget. Chapter 7. The Religious and Cultural Dimension. Within Israel's borders, faith and culture intertwined in a fragile balance between spirituality and nationalism. Judaism, once plural and dispersed, was reshaped as the ideological cement of the new nation. Religion, which once united diverse traditions, began to be interpreted through a political lens, where devotion also served sovereignty. The chosen people once again became the protagonists of a divine story, but now written in the shadow of the state. At the same time, ancient traditions were erased. Yiddish, the language of the diasporic Jews, was marginalized. Modern Hebrew, symbol of the new national project, imposed itself. Spirituality gave way to military identity. The temple ceded its place to the fortress. The myth of returning to the promised land was clad in armor and technology. It was faith in its geopolitical version, spirituality in the service of strategy. And here the secret of Israel takes on an almost paradoxical shape. The nation that sought to restore its spiritual roots ended up transforming the sacred into a structure of power. Faith, once the refuge of the soul, had become an instrument of the state. Chapter 8. Global Influence. As the decades advanced, Israel evolved from survivor to architect of power. It became a laboratory of security and technology, exporting surveillance and military intelligence to the entire world. Drones, defense systems, and espionage software, products of a nation living in a permanent state of alert, spread across borders and governments. Thus, the mentality of control became globalized: preemptive war, surveillance in the name of peace, restriction in the name of freedom. At the same time, Israel cemented itself as a strategic ally of the world's greatest powers. No decision in the Middle East was made without its echo, and behind the scenes, its influence permeated everything, from economics to entertainment, shaping perceptions and dictating agendas. The state born from trauma now exported the logic of fear, and the world, without realizing it, began to imitate it. The secret of Israel was no longer just about one people or one land. It was about humanity itself, about how fear can become a system and security a creed. Israel's story merged with that of the modern world, and the mirror revealed something unsettling: that we had all, in some way, learned to live as it does. Chapter 9. The Contemporary Awakening. In recent years, a new generation has torn apart the veil of the narrative. Historians, journalists, and even descendants of the Jewish people themselves have begun questioning the myth of the Immaculate Nation. Voices, once isolated, now unite in a chorus demanding revision, justice, and awareness. The internet, impossible to control like the old press, gave space to truths that no longer fit the headlines. Silence began to crumble. These new voices do not preach hatred, but reflection. They do not seek to deny historical pain, but to prevent it from becoming a shield for new pain. They are Jews, Christians, Muslims, and atheists who understand a simple principle: suffering grants no right to oppress. They recognize that the lesson of the Holocaust is not never again to us, but never again to anyone. And at this moment, the secret of Israel fully reveals itself. True power never resided in its weapons, but in its story, and in how that story was told. Now, as it is being rewritten, the myth begins to dissolve. The secret is not about a country, but about humanity itself, our eternal tendency to turn faith into borders, pain into flags, and fear into power. Conclusion. The legacy of the secret of Israel. The secret of Israel is not a tale of victors and victims. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's struggle with its own conscience. From prophets to generals, from scriptures to screens, the Israeli journey exposes the eternal tension between faith and power. A people who sought redemption found strength. A state that sought security found dominion. And in the midst of that path, the entire world learned that no empire is built solely by the sword, but also by narrative. Today, when we look at Israel, we see ourselves. We see how easily we justify violence in the name of justice, how we turn memory into currency and fear into law. The same instinct that raised physical and ideological walls there lives within every society that fears losing control. Israel has become a living metaphor for the modern era, a small nation that reflects both the grandeur and the contradictions of the human spirit. And then comes the question that closes, or perhaps opens, this cycle. What do we do with this secret now that it has been revealed? Do we pretend not to see it, or do we learn from it? Perhaps the true meaning of never again is not vengeance, but awareness. And if there is one lesson Israel's story leaves us, it is this: when faith becomes power and pain becomes banner, humanity risks forgetting what truly makes it divine.